installers of sanders. And I said, and there was a lot of construction going around, and there was a lot of people at that point who had disposable income. And hardwood floors were popular. So we were busy all the time. So I saw a natural need at that point in my life and just recognized it, thought about it, and acted on it. Now, do you need a little more explanation on how you do that? Or, well, just as, yeah, I think part of it's using the logic that you learn through schooling, and the other is seeing opportunities, and you try to mix both. For getting into investments, I did a pure logic grade. That was simply, what am I good at? What do I like doing? And what pays well? And then I looked at the alternatives, and from there I made some choices. And I bounced those decisions before I made them off of my board of advisors. And two of those people were investment advisors in the industry for 10 years. And one of them said, well, Tom, you went to school with me. And he was a theater major before he went to work for Merrill Lynch. He said, Tom, I was a theater major. I'm working in the business. He said, you've already owned 2 businesses. You know more than 99% of all of our people who come in. So that, for me, that was kind of, but I did take the time to ask. Other questions?
No. You talked about the laser approach versus the meandering approach. The way to describe it. I think sometimes we as Christians think that if we're following God's will, we'll take the laser approach. We'll know what that approach should be in every decision. Did you, how do you deal with the meandering approach as a Christian? Were there times when you were wondering, what's wrong with me? Why can't I find something? Find God's will for me? Or
I think when I was in high school, my goal in life was to be a Renaissance man. Don't ask me why. That was my goal. My heroes were Da Vinci and Edison. So that maybe gives a little bit. But I have a good friend. We came up through Youth for Christ together. And he was an ordinary student in high school. Barely got into Wheaton College. He was a C student, even at Wheaton. And he would work. He did nothing but study, and he got C's. Barely made it.
Worked for Youth for Christ when he got out, and he took the laser approach. This fellow went on for his master's while he was at Youth for Christ.
Right in and got his doctorate, and went to work for Youth for Christ in their training department on the national level. Then bounced into a publishing firm. If you've heard the Life Application Bible, my wife Lynn is she's the main editor on that. And this fella and his 2 partners, who's my good friend, they were the ones who formed the company that worked with Tyndale on that project. They're the ones who brought it to market. He's since gone on to doing pure consulting. So he had the laser approach. And here's somebody who had, to be honest, very ordinary intelligence and abilities at the start. But because he had a calling from God and he had a laser approach, he's an extraordinary individual today. Now, how did I feel about that? For me, we're different people, and I saw that I had a lot of skills that I could usually walk into at a young age. It was a blessing and a curse. I could walk into any job or interview and get it. Simply because I don't know, I'm affable. And from an early age, I liked doing everything. And that can work against you, but that can work for you. At this point in my life, I'm 51, I can sit down with anybody and talk to them about anything. I can sit down with the President of the United States, I can sit down with a bum on Skid Row, and I can learn something from him, and we can have a great conversation. That meandering approach, those 40 years in the wilderness, the wilderness isn't such a wilderness. There is quite a bit that's in the wilderness as far as animals and people and characters, and you learn. Moses was never alone in the wilderness. Even with the sheep, with his... He was never alone. He was always learning something, and the Lord was there. I think that as we get called in different directions, you should always cling to that the Lord has a plan for your life. And we don't, we tend to, in America, we tend to think that the plan for my life that the Lord wants is to be the greatest success. I'm going to be rich. That's the American dream. We forget about that part, the other part, which is ministry, relationships. And as the Lord brings people into our lives, or us into other people's lives, that is actually what's going to count when we move over. We cross over, it will be those relationships, it will be how we've served the Lord with the gifts He's given us. Whether we've meandered or taken a laser approach. Any other questions? Ask me anything you can think of. I'm happy to share. Yes? When I was coming up here, my wife and I were talking in the car about this. And I would have to say that for me, pure consulting, that part of my job is the most fun. Whether it's when I was talking to clients about their hardwood floors and what they wanted, or whether it's today when I'm sitting down with a fella and I'm sitting down with an organization that has $1 billion portfolio and listening to what their concerns are for that portfolio. I'm only going to go after 5 to 10% of that portfolio, which is about 50 to 100 million. But my goal is, what is their goal? So what do I enjoy the most? I enjoy listening to who they are, and where they're at, what are their needs, and then coming up with a creative bridge to get them from here to there. And usually there are 2 or 3 paths that somebody can take. So that's what gets me going. You had a question? I think when you start, and you start to ask people, a lot of people will say yes, and not a lot of people will make the time for you. And I would recommend meeting with a couple of those people individually first to see if they're serious about listening to you and giving you good advice. And if they're willing to make the commitment to meet with you 3 to 4 times a year in a group to talk over you. So yes, it does change when you first start out. And then as you, I think as you get older and you gel, there comes to be a core of people that you surround yourself with. And then some of those will leave and some new ones you bring in. So it does change, but it's not, and it is fluid, but it's not something that has a high turnover rate, because you want trusted advisors, people who know you, friends, family, professors, mentors. And when I started in the investment business, I brought in new business mentors that I hadn't had before. One fellow was a fundraiser for the local hospital. Another fellow was a retired executive who was now in real estate. So it was right across the board. You just have to, and if you need any help on that, feel free to email me and I'll help you to put together a list of how to do that. Does that help a little bit? Okay. Other questions? Well, it sounds like we've kind of run the course. Hope that it's helped a little bit, and thank you for your time.